welcome to the family. Remember to subscribe and join the family. So today I'm dealing with somewhat of a serious topic. I even brought my Bible with, because normally I just share the word that was shared on Sunday by the pastor. So then I would review that, whatever I understood from it, whatever, I just share bits and pieces of that in my socials. But I just felt this one, because it's something that God had been dealing with me about, I need to do a video in order for me to say it the way it is in my mind. That means incorporating what the pastor preached about and my thoughts, my understanding, or what God has been dealing with me about in this season. So first things first, the script that the pastor preached on, I even brought my Bible. That's how serious I am about this Bible study. So it's in Revelations 2, Revelation. It's Revelation, guys, actually. It's Revelation, not Revelations, okay? So it's 2, I think from... You can start from verse 2, but the main thing is in verse 4, where he says, "Nevertheless, I have something against you." In this King James, because my Bible, the one I have now, is King James. It says, "Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee." I love that, nevertheless and somewhat. This is after he has listed all the good works, which I know your good works, you know, this and this and this, and then he says, "But mnandithanda le version ethi, nevertheless I have somewhat," you know. I just love the flow of these words. I'm a wordsmith, so like words impress me. The "nevertheless I have somewhat," I feel like it communicates exactly what Jesus wants to communicate here in this revelation, Yaka John. So and then he goes on to say that the issue that he has with him, out of everything that he's noted that is good, that, you know, he's done, which is the church that he's addressing, is that you guys have neglected your first love. So this is what I want to talk about, the neglect of first love. When this word came on Sunday, in that week, I had just watched a sermon by Stephanie Ike. You can check it out here on YouTube. It's Walking Worthy. So from the title, you can tell that it's really quite similar to this verse that we just read now, Walking Worthy. You know, so the first thing that our pastor dealt with here was tradition, just talking about, you know, how Christianity is not a tradition, how we as people get so consumed with tradition that we want God to do things the same way. And when that word came, I had just been dealing with something that I was just refusing, basically. On social media, there was a post that I saw where this guy was saying, "Bah, you know, these days demons no longer scream because people," he was saying musicians in particular, but it's like people, because they don't live holy, then demons don't scream anymore in Nana. I felt like that was a religious statement based on tradition, based on the fact that we always want God. Like, we always want him to do things the way he's done, you know, before. And yet God is always on the move, and God is always doing a new thing, and God always does things his own way. And I feel if we are in sync with him, which is the one thing that, you know, pastor was on, being in sync with this, you know, with this whole teaching, he was on us being in sync with God, because that's the one way where we will basically keep our fire burning for Jesus. And he talked about just us remembering how we used to be, and I've been in that season of remembering how I used to be when I just gotten saved. And the reason for that is that the church I'm in now, I've been with for 6 months, and it feels like a full circle for me, because it's reminding me so much of when I had just started, when I got saved. And even the name of the church that I was in was Cornerstone, and this one is also Cornerstone. And I feel like it's that full circle moment of God just reminding me of, how I used to be, and this and this and this. And then and neglected our first love, which is Jesus. But what got me emotional, I got very emotional as Pastor was preaching, because he talked about, how we can love God, and how loving God is about service, which is through any love. Love is a doing word. Love is service. And Christ is not going to come down and love his people physically here on earth. He's going to do that through us. And Pastor even said the cross is the way it is because it's us loving God, God loving us, and us in turn loving other people, which is the core of the Christian message. Love God, love people. And so I was like, that's cool. It's amazing. I have no struggles with loving people. My struggle was service, because I'm a person who's very dedicated to serving God. Like when I'm dedicated, like that. I just give it my all. And considering that the first thing that was addressed is tradition, and the fact that you can find yourself so consumed with doing church that you can actually neglect your relationship with Jesus while you are busy in church. This happens a lot. And so I thought of the Mary Martha story. I call it the Martha syndrome, where we know the story where Jesus came and the two sisters, Omni is busy preparing food, but Lo busy preparing food. Then she got bitter, but like Sana wena, the other one is sitting at Jesus' feet. So she's like, Sana di busy ndiyapheka wena uloko uhleli. And Jesus was like, no, leave her. She knows what matters. And that's the thing, that at the end of the day, what matters is the relationship, is fellowship with Jesus, which is what Mary chose, and not the works that we get consumed by. But now reality is works are also needed. Like the Martha ministry is needed, because at the end of the day, after they chilled with Jesus, fellowship with him and this and that, they have to eat. So someone is gonna make this food. So it's the same with church. If there's gonna be things to be done, then they are gonna be done by people. But it's important that we don't get consumed by those things so much that we forget that relationship with Jesus, whereby people don't even commit to living right, which is something that I was even talking to my friend about that same week before the sermon. That's why I'm saying this is something that God has just been dealing with me about, where we were talking about just the state of the church, which is the people, and how we are so consumed with looking outside, and how like religion, tradition, church tradition and religion, the people that Jesus would call Pharisees, how they always look outside of themselves and not within. So it's always the other people that are not right. It's always the other people that are not saved enough, that are not this enough, that are not that enough. And I was like, I feel like Christianity would be such a beautiful journey if each one of us worked out their own salvation with fear and trembling, as the Bible says, because if I know that I'm not perfect, I'm not going to expect perfection from another person. And when I see the other person's imperfection, I will be gracious towards them. So I was thinking, we even spoke of Uyona, and how Jonah, we know the story, he sent to Nineveh, and then he ends up on this boat, there's a storm, and then people are wondering, what's happening? And then Punalum was in the wrong place, and this and this, and then Yona says, okay, fine, it's me, which then says he knew, uyazazi ba ndim lo out of line. So I feel like if we all could identify issues zethu, flaws zethu, and that would happen if we focus on ourselves and not other people, and then identify our flaws, and that would make it easy for us to be able to say, look, ndim lo unengxaki, ndikhuphele ngaphandle and whatnot. So one of the things that touched me was when Pastor said, like, just mentioned the things that we need to avoid in order for us to be able to pursue this relationship with Christ, this fellowship with Christ, where it takes us back to our first love, which he said we should avoid tradition and complacency. And what made me emotional in that moment is when he spoke about, how we can serve, how we can give God, our service, our all, and how church would be such a great place if we all brought our gifts and, we just, became that in sync, with God and with each other, because omunye, as the Bible says, omnye sisandla, omnye ingalo, omnye inana. But now, what makes me emotional is the fact that in as much as it sounds easier, said than done, because in as much as I know I'm the hand, but I think because of church tradition, which is a big hindrance and a big issue in this situation, you find the leg now wanting to go and do what the arm is doing, or the leg feeling like, why is the arm doing? Why am I not the one that's doing what the arm is doing in Nandan? And I feel like this has been a big issue in the church in terms of people serving God the way they should. And I believe that there are many people in the church who would like to serve. And I've had experiences where maybe I could have even left the church because of such experiences, and where it made me believe that there may be people who left because of such experiences, where people want to serve, but they're met with those hindrances of tradition, of people who don't think you are this enough or that enough, or you are too much of this, and therefore that kind of like shrinks you, and then you feel, oh, let me then shrink back to my corner, and I feel there may be people in church that actually do want to serve, but the issue is this hindrance where they are made to feel like either they are not this and that enough, or they are too much of this, and therefore they shouldn't be doing that, and I feel like that's something that I don't know how the church can address that, especially people who've been with that particular assembly for long, especially in our community assemblies, the ones that are smaller, because everyone is here, everyone is in everyone's face. Iba ninzi leyo tendency of being about, we've been here, we know what is what, and therefore who are you? You're coming and thinking, it's like ufuna ubukwa. Someone actually said it to me straight to my face, that intanda ubukwa. I still don't know what I had done, but anyways, it don't matter. I feel like my character is strong enough to withstand those things, but I won't lie and say it didn't get to me to some degree. And because words are powerful, words create, I can tell you now, there's decisions that I've made since then that were influenced by that utterance, where I'm like, okay, so should I change where I sit in church? Okay, I'm not going to be able to do that because I can't see. So I need to sit on the aisle on the side and be closer to, at least to the front, to be able to see, because I can't see when I'm far. In terms of my contribution, I've made certain decisions, because even coming here, I told myself that I'm not going to do anything. And I can tell you now, one of the things that influenced me to start doing this and that is really just seeing how our pastor is so given. I always say when I talk to people about my pastor Niti, he's everything that I believe Jesus was walking here on earth, like as a man. Like when I read about Jesus, when I see my pastor, how he operates, and just how he is to people, how he leads, how he teaches, how he loves, like in many ways, like I see Jesus. And when you see someone that humble, serving people like that, iyagqugquzela nawe to say, but I can't just sit, like really I need to do something. And when he said this year he's gonna go harder, I'm like, harder? So there's harder than this? And I know when I see him going harder, like I'm also gonna be like motivated to basically do, like in like it gets me like emotional. It gets me it revives my conscience, like when I see, someone go that hard for Jesus, and they don't have to say anything. And when Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ, that's what I see in my pastor. So it's like when he does something, I'm like, yo, I'm also going hard, because so I know that I'll probably be inspired when I see him go hard, because I don't know what hard he still has, because I thought what he's already doing is hard enough. And so, but I've made certain decisions to say, I'm no longer going to do this and this. I'm going to try and avoid this. I'm going to try and avoid that, whatever. And that has to do with things that God has gifted me with, and I have to shrink them because I'm avoiding being too much. I'm avoiding ukuthandubukwa in nan. So this is the part that is the main core of this. How do we then go back to our first love? How do we pursue serving God in the way that we should in a church that hinders people from doing the very thing? And by in a church, I mean all assemblies. Like I feel in all the different assemblies, this, I'm sure everybody has experienced a level of this. We understand. How do we go hard for God, without having to deal with this church hurt? And abanye abantu have been hurt enough to even leave church, abanye to even leave Christ, like way bengasafuni next, bengasafuni nalo Christ, because of how they've been hurt by people in church while they were trying to serve God, while all they wanted was to give God their all. So I feel like for me, what I've learned now, which I would give as an advice, if I were to give an advice, it would be pray. When you find a local assembly that you feel, this is my home, I want to make this my home, pray. And when you pray that God gives you grace to see people as He sees them. Pray that God gives you grace to understand that church is a hospital and there will be people who don't respond to treatment. Pray that God gives you grace that even when you do get hurt, you don't get hurt enough to want to leave the church, because the person who is doing that to you, or those two people or those three people, are not a representation of Christ or of the man of this house that leads this house, or a woman in your case, if your pastor is a woman. They're not a representation of the leadership of this church. What made you stay is you seeing the DNA of this church, which was love, which was service, which was this. Like in my church, I see so many people serving, selflessly. I see so many people serving with their all, and that inspires me, that motivates me. So if someone tries to hinder you, they're not a representation of everybody. Find your squad that you work well with and stick with them, and if possible ujime nekarate, because like some people nje bayafuna i-fly kick, ujime nekarate, so that at some point give someone fly kick so that you don't leave church. Omba jonga sana, try me, try Jesus. Kuyafuneka sometimes ecaweni ubenayo that don't try me, try Jesus attitude, because abantu becawe bazakutesta. I'm joking. Maybe I'm not. But yeah, anyways, that's my advice. Like, just pray. Pray for God to give you those graces, and you'll be able to navigate that. And pray. Like pray without ceasing. Ungathandazi kayi-one and then uyeke uthi, because as you grow, the challenges will also grow as you get closer to people. Because and then you sit closer, and then you start serving, you start going to home fellowships, you start now being closer and closer to people. So the closer you get to people, the more you have to pray, because it's the more you're gonna be met with hindrances and this and this and that. And also always remind yourself that I am not perfect. You understand? So yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I just wanted to share that and hope that this helps someone, and hope that yeah, maybe we can discuss it further. Come with your own advice on how to navigate pursuing, going back to your first love, which is Jesus, serving fully, and hindrances and one of the things that I was emotional about when it came to pastor saying the church would be such a beautiful space if we all gave ourselves fully for service. I was thinking of how I think I get to fear failing myself and failing God, because I feel like I've failed so much in my journey, of serving God, that whenever I go hard, back on that fear that, oh, what if I get pregnant again, or something. That's talked about into. He said, God has given us grace. God is a gracious God. The grace that God gave us to sustain us in 2022, even though we're not living right, He may just expose us. And I know this. I've learned that sometimes God exposes us not because He's cruel, but because He wants us to leave that sin. Sometimes angeke ushiye lesono senzayo until God exposes you. Then you're also exposed, that's when you would leave that sin. So, and His grace will still abound in your life, doesn't hate you. So when pastor said, hey, uyawuthusacula phaya ekwayareni uquleke or something, I'm like, yo, Jesus, like ngivele ngicinga ezo zinto, because I know when I go hard. But then, like, one mistake and the next thing, exposure and the next thing, So that also becomes one of my fears, and something that I really don't know how to deal with, because sometimes it tends to drag me back, because I'm like, hey, let me not go too hard, because what if, I fail myself. So if there's someone else who's struggling with this, I'm just sharing, just so you know that you're not on your own, and just so we can just talk about how we can all best help each other, get back to our first love and serve in our home assemblies. Yeah, I hope this helps, guys, and thank you so much for coming through. Remember to subscribe, remember to comment, and let's interact. Remember to like, share the video with other people as well, because nabanye abantwana bayayidinga le family, so that sizawuhlalani apha sithethe ngazo zonke ezi ngxaki. Thank you so much, guys, and bye.